It is even at the door. So I pray for ears to hear, and I pray for the grace to obey what is heard in Christ's name. Amen. I guess I should have just left it at 9 o'clock. Y'all have to get in here an hour and a half earlier. You are here early, on time, alert, and you get an extra hour and a half sleep, and you come dragging in. What's up with that?
It's our extra hour and a half sleep.
Yeah, if you walk in front of the camera this time, you really have to have an effort to get it done. Well, we're going to do something that's probably foreign to most of you, but you ought to get used to it. We'll get to this shortly, but we're going to read out of the 2nd chapter of Luke. That is a familiar passage, but I'm going to look at it in a different light. And as a reminder, all of the 8 feasts, which includes the weekly, points to Jesus Christ. Whether you understand it or not, every detail that's in them points to Him, one way or the other. And Tabernacles is the season of joy. It's a celebration of joy. No other feast is labeled that, not even Passover. And so we're going to look in the light of Jesus' birth being in the tabernacle season, and realize that on the 8th day of every Jewish boy, what happened?
Circumcision.
He was circumcised. So there's only 2 feasts that have 8 days to them: Passover, Tabernacles. Okay, so it has to be one or the other. And as we look at this, we're going to see some historical accounts that is fact. You can debate them if you want to, but they're historical facts of the nation of Israel, and they're true. So with the historical facts based on Scripture, then you put things together. And this is how God reveals Himself. But I'm going to tell you that without you obeying what you hear, God will not circumvent His Word and bring you revelation and show up at your door to show you things that you know not. Not going to happen. It can be made as plain could be. You will be without understanding. You will have no knowledge of what's being talked about. Not because information is not given like what we saw a couple weeks ago. Information is given in order intended to bring about understanding. See, but Jesus Christ is the only one who can open up your understanding. And He will not, that's like violating Himself if He violates the Word. Because He is the Word. And that's why a million words is not going to talk anybody into anything. And so we're going to start this to what I don't call it the Christmas story, I call it the tabernacle story. Because it is the season of joy. History in Israel has proved it out. And it came to pass in those days that went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, every one unto his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, into the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. Here's the first historical count from the nation of Israel. Flocks were brought out after Passover, and flocks were taken in the first rain in the fall, October, November. So we know that in God's calendar, tabernacle falls September, October. So, Passover, been no animals. They weren't taken out yet. You know, this is kind of a no-brainer.
Shepherds don't tend their flock in
No.
December.
No. And the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were very afraid. And the angel said unto them, Don't fear, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. Just like his kingdom coming, it's initially going to start with glorified saints and mortals who survive out of the righteous remnant from Israel, and even those pagans, if you will, that didn't do harm to the nation of Israel. The judgment of the nations that is talked about in Matthew proves this out. Okay? So, you got glorified bodied people and mortals still living together in the kingdom age. Got the picture? And so this, all peoples, I bring you great tidings of great joy, which will be for all people. The kingdom age, which is the fulfillment, the complete fulfillment of tabernacles. It's going to be for all people, Jew and Gentile alike. And it will be a time of great joy. Why? Satan's going to be bound. Every one of his hordes is this is what really, we talk about this dispensation, the age of grace that's with us in our generation versus Old Covenant and the standard of upness, if you will. What is it going to be like in the kingdom age when the tempter is not, he's not even there, and yet you still deny Christ? You think their portion in hell is going to be hotter than anybody that ever lived? Yep. Most certainly. Why? Because they'll be the most accountable people ever that has lived. See, right now, you just like we talked yesterday, you wrestle with things that the enemy, if you think he's going to leave you alone because you come to Christ, you're in la-la land. The bigger the threat you become, the greater the darts and the more frequency the darts. And that's why you have to remember, nothing's coming to me that's not either caused or allowed by God. Period. That's why it's very dangerous for you to base a walk with God on somebody else's experience other than what he said. We got one missing. Took a survey. What do you think? What do you think? What do you go on somebody else's thinking and somebody else's opinion and somebody else's experience? What if you need a physical healing? You're going to base your faith on somebody else's experience, or are you going to base it on the Word of God? That's dangerous. Very dangerous. You know, and we looked, I guess it's probably been months ago, where we looked about in the tribulation time, halfway through it, where Elijah and Enoch are killed and everybody makes merry and exchanges gifts. So what season do you think that was in? That's why Christmas is as pagan can be. You know, those words weren't written, make merry and exchange gifts. But people can read it because they don't want, like Israel, and we have seen their blindness was willful. They didn't want to know. That means I got to change. And we're going to see, well, I don't know if we'll get to it in this session or not, but we're going to look in a short section with Jeremiah that was 100 plus years after Hosea. But Jeremiah was called to who?
The weeping prophet.
No. He was called to who?
Oh.
Hosea was called to who?
Haven't studied it all yet.
Israel.
Northern.
Haven't
southern.
studied it yet? I bet I've said it at least 100 times.
Jeremiah to Judah.
But it's all confusing. I don't know.
Hosea to Israel.
There's northern, southern kingdom. There's Judah. There's Israel. There's only like 4 choices.
Well, my math says there's 2.
Northern or
I
southern.
don't know where you got 4, but I guess we need to talk. Okay. All people, for unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this will be a sign unto you. You will find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was an angel and multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, and depending on which translation you have in front of you, this one says, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill towards men, which is the most often quoted verse out there
And it's wrong.
during a certain season, and it is absolutely wrong. It's mistranslated. The original language says, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace on earth to whom God approves. Peace on earth to whom God approves.
Your mind says to whom his favor rests.
Yeah, it's close. The New American Standard is very close. You know, I don't know what.
On earth, shalom to men of goodwill.
That's what I said.
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth goodwill among men.
She said the New American Standard is pretty close.
Yeah.
Mine says whom he favors.
So, is that conditional?
Yes.
Well, what about for God so loved the world?
Yes.
That's all conditions.
That His love is unconditional.
Oh,
And keep
the
his
origin
commandments.
with Abraham. I mean,
Is it
it's
true?
Totally clear.
That
There's all
food
There's
shall
all
never
something to
believe.
it. Just like you read about medicine on a commercial. Oh, that's such good medicine, but yet they put the requirements. You might have a heart attack, you might have a stroke. You follow me, you're gonna get persecuted. You're gonna get this, you're gonna get that.
Abraham wasn't going to get nothing if he didn't leave his hometown. 0. You leave your family right now. No, I don't want to. Okay.
Well, yeah, he would have got something. It's called HE double hockey sticks. But instead, his choice, he became what? The father of faith.
Woo! That's good news.
And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away from these lowly shepherds, in other words, this absolutely tremendous revelation didn't come to the mega rabbis, the ones that sit in the great seats, had a lifetime of ministry, generation after generation, rabbi over rabbi over rabbi over rabbi over rabbi. It came to the lowliest of society of that day. This was his first advent. What should that tell you, since he does not change? There's no shadow of turning in him. What does that tell you about the revelation going prior to his second coming, which for our generation will be the rapture, the tribulation area will be his literal second coming to the planet? What should that tell you if he does not change?
If your section goes sniffing around the poor people, don't go sniffing around the preachers. In a roundabout way.
That the revelation will come to the lowly, not the highly esteemed.
It's not gonna come to what you see on the tube. I don't care if they got 500,000 people sitting under them.
I went to every seminary there was.
The rabbis couldn't handle it in Christ's days for the most part. There was a few, very few. But for the most part, they couldn't deal with it. After all, look where we sit.
It's like the thing we've said over and over, it's the intellect thing.
Well, they didn't obey, so how's their hearing going to get?
So what did these lowly shepherds do? After being scared to death,
Let's go.
and it came to pass as the angels were gone away, they didn't sit and chew on it. They didn't say, well, let's form a committee and have a consensus about what just happened. Was that really true? They heard him speak, but they knew, as we're going to see here, there was a lot in Israel knew it was the season of Messiah coming. They knew it. How did they know it? Through Bible prophecies spoken about Messiah and how he's going to come. Everything, just as today. Same thing. God would be a partial God if he did it for them and wouldn't do it for us. And somebody that just wants to parrot, well, you can't know the hour of the day. All they were saying is, I'm in a godless lifestyle and I want to continue it. I don't want to change what I'm doing.
Don't want to know any different.
The shepherds said one to another, let us now go. See, when God brings revelation to you, he's expecting you to get up, go, do it, whatever it is that he's shown to you. Not to sit there and chew on it week after week, month after month, year after year. So you get a short time period to taste and see that the Lord is good. And you'll either taste, and by the experience of how he shows himself strong, you will then believe everything that he says before you experience what it is that he says. Or you will be like most of Israel. You'll taste, but you'll develop a heart of unbelief because you hear but you don't obey. And your path will be the same path as they took if you go that way. It's written. You don't get to change what's written. Not at all. And not only did they say, let us now go even to Bethlehem, and to see this thing which is come to pass, which the Lord has made known unto us, and they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph, and the baby lying in a manger. And when they had seen it, they made known abroad the saying which was told them concerning this child. They didn't keep their mouth shut at the revelation. They didn't keep their mouth shut about the season. You know, it ought to be a no-brainer to you as to why several years ago the quote-unquote Christian community just becomes absorbed over say Merry Christmas, say Merry Christmas, say Merry Christmas. This is coming from the apostate church. Why would they be doing that? Sheila, you better pause and calmly think about that. They made known abroad. In other words, they didn't keep their mouth shut about what had happened and what was really the truth. And all they who heard it wondered at those things which were told them by the shepherds, not by the mega rabbis. Did you catch that? The lowest of society was spreading the word. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. That means they were forever in the forefront of her mind. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen as it was told to them. And when 8 days were accomplished for the circumcising of the child, his name was called Jesus, which was so named of the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And when the days of her, Mary's purification, according to the law of Moses, were accomplished, and this would have been 40 days for the birth of a male child and 8 days for the birth of a daughter.
No, just the opposite.
What did I say?
8 days for a male child and 40 for
40, yeah.
for a girl.
Yeah.
It's longer for a girl. Leviticus 12, 1 through 8.
Yep. It's been a long time since I read that. You're right. Thank you for correcting.
I just read it the other day.
Where were we?
Days of her purification, 22.
They brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord. The law of who?
Of the Lord.
Why just two things separating? One is the law of Moses, one the law of the Lord. Was it the law of Moses?
No,
No. Well, yeah.
because he got them. It was the same written, right?
Was it the added to?
Moses was whose mouthpiece?
God's.
So whose law was it?
God's.
So,
It's not difficult.
no.
Every male that opens the womb will be called holy to the Lord. This refers to the firstborn only. It wasn't optional. Every family who had the firstborn male was dedicated to God in a very special way. You got no choice. You do, but you don't. And to offer a sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of the Lord. A pair of turtle doves and 2 young pigeons, which this right here should tell you that Joseph and Mary were on the lower scale of the economy. Because when you read in the law, there was a provision made that if you couldn't afford the big critters, you can do this. So they weren't financial king and queen. And behold, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. And the same man was just and devout. What was he doing?
Waiting.
Waiting.
Well, how did he?
Messiah.
Waiting for Christ to show up because he knew the season according to Bible prophecy. He was looking. And the Holy Spirit was upon him. See, this was before Pentecost, but it's just like all through before Pentecost, we saw that the Holy Spirit was given, taken back, given, taken back, given, taken back, given, taken back. But this revelation came by the Spirit of God. And he came. Well, and it was revealed unto him by the Holy Spirit that he would not see death before he had seen the Lord's Christ. And he came by the Spirit unto the temple. In other words, he was led by the Spirit of God that it's here. It's here. It's even at the door. So his faith was proved out by what?
Action.
His action. Where was he? Why was he at the temple?
Because he needed to be there.
Why did he know he would be there?
Because he was
Because he had the
waiting.
Holy Spirit.
What did we just read?
The Spirit led him.
No. What did we just read up here with Mary and Joseph? What did they do?
They followed the law of God.
After the days of her purification, they had to go to the temple of God and do what?
Sacrifice.
Present the offering. You don't think he didn't know that?
He did the math in his head and said, all right, this day.
Well, it was no math. If the Holy Spirit tells you it's the season, well, they got to come to the temple. I'm headed to the temple and I'll wait. Because they will be there. Based on the Word of God. Get this parallel here, guys. It's no different for us in our generation today. You should be with the same mindset as Simeon and Anna. And the shepherds.
Looking forward to that day.
And when the parents, Joseph and Mary, brought in the child Jesus to do for him after the custom of the law, he then took him up in his arms and blessed God and said, Lord, now let your servant depart in peace according to your word. Because the Spirit of God had, what did he say? He had revealed to him by the Spirit, you're not going to see death till Messiah comes. You got my word on it. And he was of a great age. Doesn't tell us what, but great age, probably about Genesis' age.
And he wasn't old.
You got it. He was in his prime, wasn't he?
That's right.
And so, we aren't told the number of years between the revelation and the fulfilling of it. But there was a time that he was waiting, but then there was a change of gears, so much so that he saw, according to Bible prophecy, that he knew it was even at the door, and he headed to the temple. Father like son, son like mother. Set the example.
Oh, he was trying to cover his cough.
Oh, is that what I want?
Yeah, but instead of going like this, he went like this, and it caught him. But you were trying to make the poop sound.
Lord, now let your servant depart in shalom according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared before the face of, there it is again, all people. Tabernacles is going to be for all people. All people. All people. So you have all of these types and shadows. And just as you're going to have in the tribulation time a massive amount of Gentiles before the time of the Gentiles ends come into covenant. And so you have a light to lighten the Gentiles and the glory of your people Israel. So what part do you don't understand, Jew and Gentile? What part don't you understand? One new man. Worshiping together. What don't you get about that? Tabernacles will be the culmination of this. And Simeon blessed them. This is blessing Joseph and Mary. He wasn't blessing Christ. Mortal man cannot do that. He blesses you. So, what did he do here? Spoke the priestly blessing. And then he gives forth prophetic words, which is based on Scripture. And if you don't know what the priestly blessing is, the Lord bless and keep you. That's what I'm talking about. The Lord cause his face to shine upon you. The Lord be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom. That's what he said. It's what Jesus said over and over again. But here was some words. And said unto Mary his mother, Behold, this child is set for the fall and the rising again of many in Israel. What does that say to you, Gentile, about your walk? The more you become as he is. Everybody going to be your friend, your buddy, your pal. Your family members are just going to go a goo goo gaga over your Christ-like walk. No. When you walk as Christ walked and you look as he looks, you're going to be the cause of the rise and fall of many. You know, and we talked about last night how it's tough. You want to look at what Jesus said. No, I'm here. I've showed up. Don't think I come to bring peace. I've brought a sword. From this day forward, all I'm going to do is divide the house. Son, mother and daughter, everybody within the family, they ain't coming together because of me. I'm going to split it right down the middle. But when it shows up in our own house, we think, well, that's not going to come to our house. Our house will be different. I've heard this from Pat. Well, our church is different. We're not deceived. That and down there around the corner, boy, they got it bad. It's always the other place, the other person. It's a fact. This child is set for the fall and rising again of many in Israel, and for a sign which shall be spoken against. Right now in your life, are you a sign in people's life that they're speaking against you? Vehemently? Well, if they're not, then you've got work still to do on becoming Christ-like. Yes, a sword will pierce through your own soul also. See, I was talking to my youngest daughter this morning and had to hug her because she was in tears over this issue. Family members. It's tough. The only way you're going to get through it is by the grace of God. You're not going to get through it in your own strength. It ain't going to happen. It's hard. And I have to constantly take thoughts captive of what we talked about yesterday as far as no further rebukes. For me to violate that scripture is violating the scripture. I don't have a right to violate it because it's my own flesh and blood. That's hard. I can't get through that without the grace of God. You think somewhere you reach some kind of plateau that you don't have to take thoughts captive? You need to get off your white, puffy little cloud. That ain't never going to happen.
It's gonna happen.
Yes, a sword will pierce through your own soul also, that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. What's going on right now within our own family? The revealing of where hearts really are.
Yeah.
Not what's spoken, what's done. And there was one Anna, a prophetess, female preacher, the daughter of Penuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was of a great age and had lived with a husband 7 years from her virginity. In other words, before her husband died, they was only married 7 years. And she was a widow of about 84 years. In these days, we know that people married very young. So if she was a widow for 84 years, what do you reckon the great age was?
You gotta add 7 to that. 91.
Well, she didn't get married when she was 7 years old.
I was saying you had to add 7 because that's when.
It's at least 7.
Well, this,
More, yeah.
Well, she was a
Yeah,
widow.
then however
for
old
84
she was when she
years.
got married.
Could have been over 100.
well, this one says then as a widow until age 84. Until her age of 84. So 91 would have been old then.
She was a witness, which departed not from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers night and day. In other words, she's married for 7 years, but she did not remarry. You reckon Paul might have kind of gotten an example from Anna's life? As far as what he said about marriage?
Which thing, that nobody should be called a widow?
Well, no, about what we were discussing
Or that
a
nobody.
few days ago. To
I
where,
wish
yeah,
everybody
yeah,
would be
everybody
like
would be
me,
like
you know,
me.
if you get married, you got to tend to
Other
Yeah.
all these other things. But if you remain single,
You can,
You're
you
not
know,
as distracted.
you're totally devoted.
well, it's not so much just distracted, it's that you have responsibilities.
I guarantee you, Paul knew this woman.
We studied at the feet of Gamaliel, so. I mean, that was
Well, if you look at it, she was a prophetess as well. So she continued in the temple, fastings and prayers, because so much was revealed to her. And that's where she wanted to stay. It was close to that.
And her, like Simeon, and she coming in at that instant gave thanks likewise unto the Lord, and spoke of him to all those who looked for redemption in Jerusalem. She knew the season of Messiah's coming. And everybody that came to the temple from that day forward, what did she do? She let it be made known, he has come. He has come. He has come. He has come. What are you doing about your day? He is coming. He is even at the door. Our redemption draws nigh. It's here. In other words, it's your life breath. Just Mary pondering in her thoughts constantly on thinking about what was said. Can't get away from it. It's hard to focus on daily things of life because it's so consuming in your brain.
That's good to know, because my relationships have been awkward because I talk too much about God's stuff. So other people did that too.
And when they had performed all things according to the law of the Lord, it's interesting to me that the law of Moses it's translated the law of Moses once, but every other time, the law of the Lord. Just like these are the Lord's feasts. They're His.
But other places where you can tell that the Jews have sullied it, so to speak, calls it the Jewish feast.
Right.
But that's after it's been tainted, so to speak.
Well,
I agree, not with your feasts, your solemn days. I take no pleasure in because they.
if it wasn't a mistranslation,
Mhm.
then the Holy Spirit was placing an emphasis on what
They were.
they had made them.
Right. Well, I mean, in the
They're-
Old Testament as well, it
Yeah.
says, your solemn feasts I take no pleasure in. Your,
Right.
offerings I take not mine.
Right. When they had performed all things according to the law of the Lord, they returned unto Galilee to their own city Nazareth. Now, just like we talked about the Gospels and the stories of different things, see, Luke doesn't mention the wise men. Or the flight to Egypt, as Matthew does. So if you want the whole picture, the whole story, you got to read more than one place. Most of the time. And then put the puzzle together. But see, Matthew doesn't mention the shepherds. That's where people come up with the Bible's just full of a bunch of errors. No, you're just making confident assertions about that which you don't even know what you're talking about. And the child grew and waxed strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. So, it doesn't matter whether you come into the covenant at 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever, or 60. You're a child. And as a child of Christ, what are you to do?
Grow.
Grow how?
Strong. Filled with wisdom.
That's your assignment in a nutshell. And until you start being faithful over little things, God's not going to put you in charge of much. And that can apply to great revelation. Why? Because you'll screw it up. And then cause many people to be defiled by your screw up. Does it not say, he who is faithful over a little will be put in charge of much? Is the little defined? So what does that mean? You're to grow in grace. The rest of the New Covenant emphasize that. Are you to grow in grace and knowledge? I don't believe it's a suggestion. So here we have the tabernacle story. It's a season of joy. You know, but it was a season of joy, but what literally happened in that season of joy, aside from the birth of Christ and the joy of all of these people, well, what began to happen?
I was going to say the clock started running.
What happened that was sorrowful?
About later on or during this time?
All the babies were
What-
killed at this
Yeah,
2-year-old, 2 years.
What happened to an untold number of babies in the area? They were slaughtered. What's joyful about that? Well, they're with him. But it was a sorrowful time. Joy in the midst of sorrow. So what does that tell you about our day? At the advent of his second coming.
Bittersweet. Maybe that's where I think bittersweet.
Same.
There's going to be
Joy in the midst
sorrow
of
in the
sorrow.
midst of joy. You know, it's whether it was intended by the creators of Christie or not, you know, I don't know. But there's a lot of hold on to joy, Christy. You're going to need it. Here, take this leaf. Hold on to it. That's a choice. Things that's going on in the immediate in our midst. You're going to have to hang on to it or you're going to be eaten up with gall. It will not make you better, it will make you bitter. And you have to focus on the truth. And so, this is the joy of the season. Now we're going to have to look at some of the sorrow. And since the majority of the Bible from beginning to end, is made up of sorrows. It's made up of harsh consequences, judgments, warnings. If God Himself ordained and decreed that this book is to be that way in every book He penned, why does the apostate church want to spend less time there than anywhere? Let's do 98% of the good. I have seen out of their own mouths pastors say, okay, I mean, it'd just be one little old, all right, I've said that now. Now let me get to what I'm really called about, and that's to uplift you and encourage you, and for you to just go out of here just glad to be in the house of the Lord. I don't find that anywhere. Their job is for you to go out clean. Clean. And we're going to see that God does raise up a certain assignment of people. We're going to look at that first. It's not written up here. But I want you to turn to Jeremiah right quick, which, like I said, is 100 plus years past Hosea, where we've been. He's addressing Judah.
Jeremiah what?
Chapter 6.
Should have known that.
And we're going to read 16 through 30 for the most part, but I want you to focus in on verse, well, let's read 26 and 27. Let's put those two together, and then we'll start back at 16. Gird yourself with sackcloth, wallow yourself in ashes. This sackcloth and ashes is just an outer symbol of repentance. This is all that this means. You read about sackcloth and ashes. He or she or they or whatever was in sackcloth and ashes. They were in repentance. But if you read the context of some of the scriptures that it's referring to, you'll see that the repentance was only outward. Had nothing to do with a complete interchanging. Make yourself mourning as for an only son. Make most bitter lamentation. For the spoiler will suddenly come upon. And notice Jeremiah says, us. Because it doesn't matter whether the righteous remnant or those who refuse to turn. You're going to experience that judgment. You're going to be in the midst of it. No way around it. And God says, I have set you, Jeremiah, and if you read now King James, it says for a tower and a fortress, which is a poor translation. Basically, it should have been translated, I have set you as a scrutinizer. I've set you, Jeremiah, as an examiner. Get this picture. Because this is who I am. Placed there by the hand of God. I have set you, Jeremiah, for an examiner, a scrutinizer. Where? Among my people. My people. That you may know and to test their way. Would any of you like to venture, very simply put, in just plain English, what that means?
Stand where they stand and sit where they sit.
Remember, What's an examiner or a scrutinizer?
They examine everything you do.
That what?
They examine everything you do. It's like you take a test online and they're watching to see if you're gonna cheat or walk and they'll cheat on the.
Yeah, but what does that have to do with you? Well, how? Give me simple. What does it mean? Don't give me some spiritual guru answer.
So talking about us doing this?
No, accountability.
No.
I mean, it's not like, it's more like an accountability, because, I mean, somebody can see an outward thing, but then you scratch the surface just a little bit and see what's in it. It gives you accountability. I don't know how I'd say it.
Just to watch you and check if you're doing what you should be doing.
Basically, you're saying this and you're seeing if what they say is what they're doing.
Say is what they're doing. That's good.
Jeremiah was an observer so that he can see and know why God was doing or was going to do what he needed to do, because he needed to see that their way was wrong.
What happens to you in your own thoughts or whatever when somebody starts sticking their nose in what you perceive as your business?
Get defensive.
Especially when they are exposing the intents of your heart, which is what prophecy does. It exposes your true motivation. It exposes not where you think you are, but where you really are. That doesn't win friends and influence people. It, matter of fact, makes you squirmily very uncomfortable. And the more you hear, the more accountable you are, and the less mercy needs to be extended to you. That's why all of the true prophets in Israel, the majority of the people hated. Vehemently. Even their own family members. You need to keep your head wrapped around this. It's in your house. And I've said, I didn't ask for this assignment. And as I've told you before, as the day gets closer that I leave and there's still some undone work that you haven't brought to perfection, the rebukes are going to get harsher, harder, and closer between. That you are to test their way. You expose where they really are. You scrutinize them to the nitto-ditto. The whatever that terabyte and megabyte, whatever that kind of language stuff is. And you do it whether they receive it or reject it. And Janae read yesterday about obey your spiritual leaders, those who are watching over your soul. Don't cause their job to be grievous by your consistent disobedience. Line up. Get in line. Walk the straight path. Because the unprofitability for you is you losing your soul if you continue down the same path. So don't make me leave here grievous. Get on with it. Okay, let's just go back over to Hosea. We'll come back to Jeremiah in a little while. Whether after the break of this session or now we stopped with Hosea. We saw about the backsliding heifer. We saw about those promoting the whoredoms and encouraging it, and how the wind of God is going to eventually invalidate or discredit all of the false doctrine. That will happen. And the being ashamed, even if that is just a mode of correction, it doesn't guarantee repentance. Somebody can be ashamed because they got caught, not necessarily that they believe they were wrong in what they did.
Or care if they were wrong.
Yeah.
They may be embarrassed.
And that's why these recordings and stuff. See, it's pretty hard for you to remember everything that's talked about. You don't take advantage of them and go back and play. I mean, the documents that God had me put pen to paper, I read all the time, because it's a word from God to His people. It's not Scripture. And I need it as much as anybody else. I'm just a mouthpiece. It doesn't mean it doesn't apply to me, because I'm to deliver the message. And every time I read it, He opens up something. Wow. You read it one time and discard it. Sorry for you. So here we kind of come back to the sour part of where we are. Verse 1 of chapter 5, and like we said, Ephraim began in chapter 4 to be named, and is named no less than one time in every chapter from here to the end of the book, which in its original context, it just means that from the writing of the beginning, since there were no chapter and verses, after God dealt personally with Hosea and his assignment and everything he was to do, and began to use him as a mouthpiece, then Ephraim over and over and over and over and over again, talking about the personal relationship that he has with his people. Hear you this, O priests. And here he's talking about to the rulers, the religious leaders, but who's the priesthood today?
We are. Those who-
So is he speaking to you?
Mhm.
Yes. So he says, not only hear this, O priests, but what?
Pay attention.
Take heed.
Hearken. What does that mean?
Pay attention. Hear and
Listen,
receive.
listen, pay attention.
I know you hear me, but do you listen?
You, O house of Israel, give an ear. You, O Gentile, who has joined the covenants of Israel, give an ear. O house of the king, for judgment is towards you, because you have been a snare on Mizpah and a net spread on Tabor. Now, these places here mentioned, they were military outposts, which were watchtowers. And so we know from previous readings, these military outposts were there for what reason? Why were they stationed where they were stationed? Military man?
Protection.
To sound an alarm, hey, they're on the horizon, they're on the border. So he's making a correlation here to where the priests, the leaders of Israel, should have been like military outpost purpose for protection, not for joining in and propitiating the corruptness. And the revolters are profound to make slaughter, though I have been a rebuker of them all. Now, you keep your finger right there and you turn back to Jeremiah 6. I guess I should have told you just to keep your finger at Jeremiah 6. But verse 28. Now remember, there's about 100 plus years between these words. What we're reading in Hosea versus Jeremiah. Because God's word doesn't change, and if you're wayward, the words to turn are the same. Verse 28 says, they are all grievous revolters. And basically, this word revolters is just stubborn, obstinate, or rebellious. Now, why would here we have, they are all revolters, but here Judah is called grievous revolters?
Isn't that worse?
They more accountable?
100 years worth.
Walking with slanderers, they are brass and iron. They are all corrupters. The bells are burned, the lead is consumed of the fire, the founder melts in vain, which is God, for the wicked are not plucked away. Reprobate silver shall men call them, because the Lord has rejected them. I want you to understand, after all that Judah saw with what happened to the northern kingdom, and even though the furnace of affliction was fiery hot in judgment against them, they still refused to turn. That's where we are. This is his covenant people. God's own fire could not separate the dross from the silver out of his people. And we're more accountable than they are in this trip through history. But this is what's going to happen in the trib as well. The majority of Israel will die because they refuse to separate the dross from the silver. So the church without spot or wrinkle will be few in this generation because they refuse to separate the dross from the silver.
We're going to need that message as those days continue to.
You're going to need to remember it.
Yeah.
Just as this was penned like we talked about, a spoiled generation. You're sitting comfortably in a chair. Have your own personal scriptures.